Okay, I think we'll get started. I think people are still signing on, but I'd like to welcome everybody to Career Conversations. This is a U of R webinar series, and it's meant to help people navigate their professional development and their careers by offering different webinars on skill building or just topic related, industry related, stage of life. And today we have Scott Wimer with us from the class of 1976. And he is one of our newest career coaches with the University of Rochester. And we're going to be talking about strategies for career transition. Just a couple of things before we get some information from Scott about who he is and how he came to be a career coach. I just wanted to reiterate what I said in the email, which is send questions at any time during this conversation. This really is meant to be interactive and less passive than just listening to a presentation. Scott really wants you to send in your questions so he can answer as many as possible during this hour. We will be sending out this video afterwards. And I invite everybody to use the chat box or the Q&A box, which is at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on where you have your settings. And I think that's probably it for now. We had a lot of people sending questions already, Scott, so I'm going to just get right into it. But first, could you let us know a little bit about yourself and your experience with the University of Rochester?
Okay, thank you, Michelle. I'm happy to be here. Let's see, I was in the class of 76 at the University of Rochester. When I got to Rochester in 72, I had been a math whiz in high school. That was my best subject. I was really good in math. I never had any problems in it. And I was hoping to be a math major. Well, I took John Harper's theoretical calculus class, first semester freshman year, and I was totally lost in it. I would literally, every class, I would sit there, and within the first 5 or 10 minutes, I would just sort of zone out, and I would have no idea what he was talking about. Somehow I managed to get a B+ in the class, but I was just totally lost. And after that class, I had to rethink whether I should be a math major. So I ended up majoring in psychology. I almost did a minor in philosophy. I was one class short of that. But my junior year, I spent at the University of London on an exchange program in philosophy with King's College London. Then when I graduated in 76, I went to UCLA, where I got my master's and PhD in psychology, minoring in management. So that's my academic background.
Well, that sounds great. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so I think we'll just dive right into the questions. And my first question to you, and I apologize ahead of time if I look down, but I don't want to miss anybody's question that has sent one in. How do you know when it's time to change careers?
Great question. I think there are two main reasons why people change careers. Some people have to. Some people find that they suddenly lost their job and that their industry or their job function no longer exists or is about to go under. And then they're faced with the dilemma that, okay, everything I trained to do so far was helpful before, but now it's no longer helpful and I must pivot. So some people, there's no question, they know they have to make a change. And then there are others where there are no external reasons forcing them to make a change, but they just feel a growing sense that something's not right and that they're not happy in their career, and they fantasize doing something different, and they just at some point decide, you know, this isn't working for me, it's time to make a change.
And in your experience as a career coach, what are the most popular reasons that you've experienced yourself with clients?
The most popular reasons?
Yeah.
Well, I've probably had more of the people in the, well, I know, I'd say maybe it's evenly split between those two categories. I was going to say more in the first category, but today there are probably more people today there are probably more people who feel the need to make a career change. but I find it just runs the gamut. For those people who find themselves just gradually becoming disenchanted with their careers, some of them are very serious about making a career change, and they just know they've got to make a change. Others, it's more of a gnawing sense of, something's not right. I'm not sure if it's my career. I'm not sure if it's the particular job I'm in, my boss. That's often having a bad boss will kill the joy of any job. Maybe it's the company. I don't fit with the company culture. And sometimes when people look into other options, they end up deciding, the job I'm in right now, it really is good. I've just been looking at it in a different way, and I need to change my perspective. So for example, I'm thinking of one person in particular who was, he was actually in a career group that I was leading, where this was a group of MBAs from UCLA. And he said, I've got this job in the public sector. It is so easy. I can do it in my sleep. I spend 20 or 30 hours a week doing my job. It is so boring. I wish I had a job like the rest of you have, where you're actually using your skills you used in the MBA program. Well, over the weeks of this program, when he got to know the other people, he realized that most of these folks were working 60 or 70 hours a week. And they got satisfaction from their careers, but they paid a huge price personally, and he did not want to pay that price. Mm-hmm. And towards the end of the 5 or 6 weeks, he said, I am so grateful I have my job. Yeah, it's boring, it's not fulfilling, but I love scuba diving. I love traveling. I love being able to take lots of vacations. I've accrued all this vacation time. And I am happy to make this trade-off. So sometimes that happens, that by exploring options, people feel like, they've given themselves the freedom to really look at what the options are, and they end up looking at their current job in a new light.
Well, we just got our first question in, our first couple of questions in live here. And it is, I'm 55 and on my second career. Now I would really like to become a kindergarten or first grade teacher. Am I being silly?
No, you're not being silly. I think it is entirely normal and natural to have some interest or some passion for doing something in your life and to want to do it. The question is, practically, what would it take to do that? What would it take to be a teacher in a school system? If it's a public school system, you need a certain credential. And what would it take to go back to school and get that credential? In private schools, those credentials are less relevant. And so the question is, how much are you willing to invest in looking into this and ultimately take the risk of making a change?
Thank you. So we're in this pandemic, and as you mentioned earlier, there are circumstances that have forced people to either consider a new job or a new industry because their industry is in shambles because of the pandemic. So I'm asking the question, what advice do you have for people that are in an industry that is either like super challenged or is non-existent at this point? And what can people do, to find future work?
Mm-hmm. Well, some industries, it looks like they may come back, but it may take time. Other industries, less so. Some are just decimated, like entertainment. For now, entertainment is decimated, or event planning. It would be quite a long time before that comes back, if it ever does in the same way. So I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, I know, it was a little wordy.
No, that's okay.
So I'm asking you, what advice do you have for people who might have to now find new work?
Right.
And I can give you some other examples of, for people who are thinking about going in a new direction completely. So let's start with that one, if they're going to change industries.
Well, the biggest question to ask is, what transferable skills do I have? So even if, let's say, I'm in retail, and that's what I've done my whole life, or I'm I'm in the travel industry. What things have I learned in this industry that I can take with me to some new industry? So there are some things that are easily transferable, like communication skills, project management, budgeting, being able to work effectively on a team. These are things that over the years you've picked up, and they may be soft skills, but they're very important. If you're interviewing for a job and you can demonstrate that you're good at those things, that's a lot. So those are skills that you take with you, and as well as some technical skills. You look at your skill set and say, where can those skills be transferred to?
Here's a question. I'm unhappy with current career job industry, so 20 plus years, but still don't know what I want to do. Are there any tools, resources to help pinpoint potential careers, industries that would match my skill set? So a little bit of what we were just talking about.
Okay.
But do you have some tools or resources that might help them?
Resources. Well, one tool or research are career inventories. They're not for people mid-career, to be honest, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to learn, but there are those that exist. There are traditional ones like the Strong Vocational Interest Inventory or the Myers-Briggs, which looks at your personality type. I think the best tool is Career Leader. It's specifically for careers in business. But rather than looking at tools, I think what's usually a better approach is to just think about what do you really enjoy doing, whether it's at work or in other aspects of your life. When do you feel most alive? And that when you're doing this particular thing, time stands still and you just love what you're doing. And it may be something that doesn't translate into an actual job, but it can give you a clue as to what kind of stuff you want to do in an ideal job if it exists. So once you've identified, what I really like to do is talk to kids and help them learn. Then you can reach out in whatever way, whether it's an internet search or reading about possible jobs or talking to friends or talking to contacts once removed, and find out what jobs exist for people who like to work with kids. In addition to the obvious ones like being a teacher, there are probably a lot of nonprofits that work with kids. There are social service agencies that work with kids, and just reach out and find out what jobs are there that fit these general vague criteria that I have right now. And then if you get a more specific idea, then research those particular jobs. And I'd really encourage you to find people who do that and just talk to them and do an informational interview and just say, I'm thinking about getting into kindergarten teaching, for example. I'd like to talk to a few real kindergarten teachers who've actually done this and find out what's it like for you. And most people, I think, are happy to talk.
Yes, and we also have a new platform to help people do that, to help people find these people who are working in these different industries. The Meliora Collective, which is our new online platform for career exploration and networking and mentorship. So I would also suggest that people who are interested in new industries can go onto this platform as an alum, a parent, or a student, and you can use our different filters to find the people that you're looking for in those specific industries. So that's one resource that we also have and that you can leverage through the University of Rochester. So we have a lot more questions. Here's another one. I have been at my current job for 16 years now, and I have been promoted many times and can rise as far as I can go. I can't take it anymore, but I'm worried about the risk and taking a pay cut during the pandemic with a new job. Where I am now, my job is safe, but it is also taking a toll on my mental health. Your advice would be appreciated.
That is a wonderful question. And there isn't an easy answer. People have very different tolerances for risk. Some people are natural risk takers and they're willing to make a jump and hope things work out. And other people like to hold on to what they've got. And there are people who are on all the way along that continuum. I think that I've got a few different streams of thought around this question. One has to do with the role of money and understanding what do you need and what do you want. Sometimes we think about how much money we need when it's really how much money we want. I've known people who've been exceptionally rich, people who've made, $1 million a year, and they think they can't retire. They think they don't have enough money. And I remember I was talking to I was consulting in this one organization, and the head of the office said, in 5 years I could retire. And I looked at him straight in the eye and I said, no, Willie, if you wanted to, you could retire right now. And suddenly his jaw dropped open. And, he realized, yes, he could retire, but for whatever reason, he was holding on to this belief that I can't retire unless I've done X or unless I have this much money. But it's not a matter of could he retire, it's that did he want to retire and accept the trade-offs of what would it take to be earning less money. And I think with money, it has to do with if you're married, who your spouse is, and what family obligations you have, and it has to do with whatever messages you've gotten as a child. Some of us have powerful messages about how much we're expected to earn and tying money to our self-worth. Another line of thinking along this is, how bad is this job? And what kind of a toll does it really take on your mental health? Mm-hmm. And there's the boiled frog syndrome, where if a frog is dropped into boiling water, according to this, I don't know if it's true or not, it supposedly jumps right out because it's so hot. But if you put a frog in a pot of water and you slowly turn up the heat, the frog doesn't notice it. And ultimately, when the water boils, the frog dies. And I think with people, sometimes if you're in a bad situation and nothing dramatic happens that forces you to realize, oh my God, this is terrible, but things are just uncomfortable and unpleasant, and you're not being treated with respect, and you just know something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it, it can wear at you, and time goes by, and you just sort of get used to this, as this is the new normal. Whereas it very slowly and gradually takes a toll on your mental health. I'm thinking of one individual who was I was coaching her. She was the number 2 person in about a 500-person company, doing fantastically well. She was getting all sorts of accolades. Everybody respected her. And she had a boss who was abusive to her. And she just put up with it, but it was getting to her. So she was worried. She believed the old adage of it's better to look for a job when you have a job. But she was a very accomplished, successful person. And I knew that she would be much better off if she just quit without another job. And even though that's not, generally speaking, the best advice, I urged her to do that because I saw what a toll it was taking on her. So one day she just mustered up the courage and decided to quit. And sure enough, within a few months, she found a much, much better job. As it turned out, her salary almost doubled. She is now the CEO of a larger agency, and she's thriving in that job. So sometimes if you're in a bad situation and you don't have to have the steady paycheck, that's an option. And again, no one size fits all. It really depends on you and what your circumstances are and how much of a risk you're willing to take.
Thank you. So we have a lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and get through all of them. Okay. All right, here we go. A career counselor reviewed my resume, and the conclusion was that I've had 20 plus years of experience and I've done a lot, but I have no achievements that reflect that level of experience. No management positions, no promotions, no increased income, no new opportunities in 10 plus years. Is this a good indication of a need to change careers?
I don't think looking at a resume, you can come to a conclusion about whether you need to change careers or not. Um, I think a mistake some people make is listening to the advice of others. Sometimes people with good intentions will give advice saying, oh, you should be doing this. There are different ways people manage their careers. One traditional way is having an upward trajectory and just climbing the corporate ladder so that one job leads to the next, to the next, to the next. And that's one of the ways to make the most money besides being an entrepreneur. A different career path is a steady state career path, or sometimes called a craftsman path, which is where you pick something that you're good at and you just love doing, and you have no aspirations for doing anything else. So I'm thinking of my dentist of many decades. She just loved being a dentist. She was perfect at it. She was fascinated by working on teeth, and when she would do something and it would work out right, you could just see the joy in her face, and she loved it. And she loved chatting with people, but not getting in real long conversations. And she had found the perfect career for herself. And I can think of a number of other examples of people who have found a niche, they do something they just love, and it's a mistake for them to take someone else's advice where someone says, you could be promoted to be a manager or a director or run your own company, because that may make more money, it may give more prestige, but it's not what they love doing. I can't tell you how many managers I've gotten to know over the years who really are not good at, and more importantly, don't like managing people. I'm thinking of one engineer who, he was a fairly high-level engineer. He had maybe 30 to 50 people under him. And he once confided in me, excuse my language, he says, you know, I hate this management shit. He said, I just wish I was an engineer solving problems. That's what I love doing. But unfortunately, I'm at a stage where I'm making tons of money and I can't quit. Now, he could quit, but he was in golden handcuffs. He felt he couldn't quit, so he was stuck in something that he really didn't enjoy. I think I can count on maybe probably one hand of the number of managers I've known who voluntarily taken a step down because they realized either they didn't like it or they weren't good at it, and they much preferred their old job. So just because someone else has some plan for you that you should be doing something, I think it's important to really be true to yourself and know yourself and think about, what do I truly want in life and in my career? And that's another thing. Some people see their career as the main part of their life. And for other people, their career is a means to an end. I have a personal friend who's a very, very bright guy. He's now retired. And he was in the federal government, and he got promoted to the highest level he could without being a manager. And he was very, very competent. People were always urging him to go for management positions, but he knew that he loved his vacations. He loved to be able to go home and not take work home with him. And he knew himself very well. And so he constantly turned down all these opportunities. You know, he made less money, but I think he was a lot happier in his life, that he knew his priorities, that rising as high as he could was not a priority for him.
Yeah, it's good to remember that there's a balance in there. The next question is, how can I make my resume stand out and get noticed in the midst of hundreds of people applying for the same positions?
Yes. Well, let me answer this in two ways. First, about the resume itself, and then second, about how do you stand out and get noticed apart from your resume.
Okay.
I would say show your resume to a number of people who you respect, and be open to their feedback. Because sometimes when we write our own resume, we see things through our own eyes, and it's good to get some fresh pairs of eyes looking at your resume, and see if the people who know you well, see if they say, oh yeah, you're really highlighting your accomplishments, or maybe you're not. and write the resume for the job you're looking for. So it doesn't have to be an accurate snapshot of exactly what you've done, but rather what skills and experiences do you want to highlight? So a potential employer for the job that you want will look at that and say, oh yeah, they've got these skills and those skills that fit what we're looking for. Then the broader answer to that question beyond the resume is, yes, if you're applying for a job that's posted online, you're going to be competing with tons and tons of people, especially now. People who are good at job search try to find opportunities beyond those that are already posted. And I know networking is one of those overused words, but if you can reach out to people and try to find opportunities, and not just reach out to people you know, but ask them who they know, who you might not know now, who might know of opportunities in this field you're looking for, and then just get to talk to these people, you'll have a much better chance of uncovering opportunities that sometimes may never get posted. There's a statistic that of the people who get their jobs through networking, half of them get their jobs from someone they hadn't previously known.
So that's a great lead into my next question about networking, because a lot of what we do in life is try to find those connections, and everybody always says, you know, it's about who you know.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about networking and the value that it brings, and what kind of networks are out there that people should consider tapping into?
Okay, well, one set of networks are professional networks. If you're in human resources, for example, join SHRM or ATD or some network that people in your profession gravitate towards. That can be a very valuable set of associations to be involved with. Networking ideally should be a constant activity, not just when you're in job search mode. And it's important to cultivate your network. I think people have different preferences in terms of how much they like to network virtually versus actually talk to people, and in pre-COVID days, meet with people. Generally speaking, I think it's good to have a mixture. You want to have a really good LinkedIn profile and be active on LinkedIn. You also want to reach out to people on a closer basis. So you have some people you get to know much better. So there should be ideally concentric circles of people who you know very well, a little less well, and then ultimately a very broad reach of people. And so the best networkers have many contacts, but they also have a small number of contacts that they can confide in. So let's say that, like a previous person who asked the question, they're really unhappy at their job. Before they make a decision about what they want to do, they reach out to their closest people and they talk honestly about how they feel about their current work, and just explore with others, you know, what other options do I have? You know me, and, you know, do you think I'd be happy, you know, if I changed jobs within the same industry or looked for something completely different? And people in your network can be very valuable that way. Or if you're asking for feedback, you know, if you've been interviewing, you haven't had luck, and if there are people who you can confide in and ask them, well, what am I doing something wrong? Maybe do a mock interview with me. So you can ask for different things from different people at different levels within your network. But generally speaking, it's important to have a broad network. It's good to reach out to people, not just when you want something important from them, and make it an exchange. So you're giving and you're helping and you're also receiving.
And along that same lines, don't forget about the University of Rochester, the Meliora Collective. So I did get a question about where they could find the Meliora Collective, which is another place they can network, just like LinkedIn, but for the University of Rochester community. And that you can find it at thecollective.rochester.edu. And I'll send that out along with the video and some other resources. So we have a lot of questions that are starting to come in about you know, somebody who's talking about I'm 29, but the long term is always on my mind. What advice would you give for those on the younger side in a quarter life crisis on navigating your career path to find purpose and curiosity early on to help carve a long-term path? Please be mindful of ageism. Wow, 29.
Oh, it goes in
And
both directions.
yes, that's true too. And then there's another, I just want to do a couple of these and then we can kind of, because I think they're similar. I'm only 3 years into my teaching career, but I'm feeling like I rushed into my career choice and can't see myself in this career forever. However, I don't want to make the same mistake and rush into a new career. How can I get a feel for a career without the luxury of doing something like taking an unpaid internship, et cetera? So
Mhm.
just for the people who are maybe a bit younger and with less experience, what would you say about some of these situations?
Oh, those are great thoughts in those
Yeah,
questions.
really good questions.
Um, how can you get experience without taking an unpaid internship or doing something major? Are there some organizations you could volunteer for? Like, let's say you want to get a job in finance, for example. Um, maybe you can be the treasurer of some nonprofit that you sign up for. Um, or find some, if you want to try out a new skill or a new role, see if there are volunteer opportunities or maybe even a nonprofit board you can get involved with and try to use your skills there and see, oh, do I like doing that? Is this something I find fulfilling? Um, Also, as I'd mentioned before, there's value sometimes in informational interviewing and just getting to know folks. Let's say you're thinking of being an actuary. Um, Find some actual actuaries in your network. And by the way, with LinkedIn, it's very easy to type in either the name of a company or a job and just see if you have a lot of connections. I'm sure someone will pop up who's an actuary or someone who knows an actuary. And then just reach out to the person and say, you know, may I talk to you for a few minutes and find out a little bit about your job? And again, most people, I think, are happy to talk about themselves and their experiences. Especially if you seem sincere and want to genuinely learn about this new field. I think also when you're young, it's good to just sort of, I don't know how to say this succinctly, but try as much as possible to be aware of your feelings and what really interests you and what gives you passion and joy. And that may be different from all the things you've been taught by parents and teachers and others about what you should be doing. It's very sad that I know a number of people who've chosen careers that they have no interest in because one or the other parent convinces them, oh, you really should be a blah, blah, blah. And they end up doing that. Sorry for the honking horn in the background.
Okay.
And I think it's important to really be honest with yourself about what do you like about your job and what don't you like. Even if these are things that you feel you shouldn't be thinking, you know, but just as much as possible, try to be honest with yourself. And maybe with the benefit of talking to another person, you know, ask them, you know, when do you see me happy and when do you see me not happy? Whether it's a counselor or a friend or a colleague, sometimes people have more insights about you than you have about yourself. The other thing is, I think if you worry about making a mistake, that what if I get into another career that also turns out to be a dead end? Some people can overthink things and worry a lot. And there's no way, ultimately, there's no way of knowing if something's right for you until you do it. And there can be a series of successive approximations, and ultimately you get into something that's more to your liking, and that can change over the years. I think that there's one person I know who's a very successful individual who loves her work, and she sort of had a spiral career, or an upward spiral, where she would do one thing, And then she'd move to something different, and she'd bring a few skills she had from her first job to her new job. And then she'd decide to move to something, very different from that. And so she'd bring a few skills from her first job and her second job to this next job. And each time she'd make what seems like rather large moves, but there'd be a certain thread that goes throughout her career where she'd use some of her skills and then drop others off and build new skills along the way. And that if you don't think of it as, I've got to find the right career, it's not like, let's say you decide to go to medical school and become a doctor. That's a huge commitment. But there are other careers where you don't have to make that much of an investment. You decide to do something a little bit different. You may have to take a few courses or learn a few new things, but it's a moderate investment, and then you do this new thing. And from this new thing, you realize, okay, here's what I like and don't like about this new thing. And here's what I like and don't like about this work environment. Maybe I'm better off in a corporate environment or a less corporate environment. Maybe I prefer nonprofits with people who are more interested in causes and service. Or maybe I thrive in big political organizations, or maybe I don't. Maybe I like to work by myself. And in the extreme, maybe I want to start my own business. So there are just loads of options, and ultimately, the best way to learn about what's right for you is to do it. And only by doing it do you realize, oh yeah, this is what I really like, or this is what I don't like.
So something you just said, I'm going to hop in here for a second. Any insights into jumping from a long-term professional career into an entrepreneurial project with no income or other guarantees besides big motivation? So what do you think?
I think it depends on you. It depends on, do you have enough savings? Because starting an entrepreneurial venture usually doesn't go as well as you anticipate at the start. And there are a lot of bumps in the road, and you don't know about them until you face them. And it depends, how much are you willing to take risks? How much support do you have? Do you happen to have a spouse who gets very nervous when he or she doesn't see that steady paycheck coming in? Or is that person genuinely supportive of you? And it's important to have honest, realistic conversations with that person. And just, it takes a very different mindset to be an entrepreneur. I think some people become entrepreneurs because they have a passion for something, and they just want to build something and create something and do something that's theirs and that they feel is really important. And there are people who are entrepreneurs because they hate having a boss. Some people just don't like someone else telling them what to do and having authority over them. And so if they start their own business, they're their own boss. And so that's a very different motivation for why you might start something.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. We're going to talk about new jobs, salaries, and things like that. There was a question that came in ahead of time, and it was about making a transition without starting at the bottom. So in other words, after you've reached a level of responsibility and title and compensation, how can you transition to something new without losing all of these that you've gained in the past, that you've gained throughout the years? So that was a question. And then there was another question about, which I know you'll cover as well, but sort of talking about what if if the move isn't lateral. I mean, we're in a pandemic right now, and jobs, people are in difficult situations where jobs are hard to find. So if you have all this experience, but you're finding another job that's, not quite the same level, when is it okay to take less money? The whole salary question is a really big one for people. And sometimes people don't take these opportunities because they think that they're either, that it's beneath them or that it's not enough money. So what should they consider when they're thinking salary and job?
Wow, that's such a rich set of questions.
It's a lot of them, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Well, these are real things. Money can be very important to people, either for practical reasons and or symbolic reasons. Some people just hate the idea of taking a pay cut, no matter what. Some people feel they have to move up and up and up. And money means very different things to different people. The research, by the way, shows that at about $80,000, up until then, the more money you have, it does increase your happiness. But beyond that, the research is less conclusive, but it generally says the more money you have after that doesn't really have much of an impact on your level of happiness. And in some cases, having a lot of money actually brings a whole set of extra problems. But I think I'm getting a little far afield from your question. The question was about how do you make a transition and not give up what you have? Sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't. It's easy for people to think from their own frame of reference that I was making X dollars, my next job needs to be X plus 5% or X plus 10%, or at least X. And this is what I want, or this is what I need, and so that's what my next job should be. Well, when you're out looking for a job, the more relevant question is not, what do I want or need, but is, what are my skills and experiences worth in the marketplace? So if you're applying for job X, which may be in a different company or a different industry or a different job function, the question the people who will be hiring you will be asking is, what is the appropriate salary range for this job for a person with this level of skills? And they'll be looking at different candidates who fit within the category of what they're looking for. And they'll say, yes, for this job, the salary range should be 110 to 140, just to pick some numbers. And the fact that you were only making 80,000 before, that shouldn't knock you out. And the fact that you were making 200,000 before, that shouldn't knock you out. But it sometimes does, because sometimes interviewers will think they'll have their own stereotypes about what people are willing to accept. If you need to take a step down, if, for example, your function just doesn't exist anymore, or for whatever reason you can't have a job that pays the level you have been paying, you need, at an appropriate point in the interview, to make it clear that you recognize what the typical salary range for this job is, and that that's fine with you, and that you're not necessarily looking to make the same amount of money. If, for example, let's say you're going from the for-profit world to the nonprofit world, unless you're going to be at a very high level and making a jump in level, you're going to take a big pay cut. And you need to make it clear that you're not expecting to make the same. You want to be paid fairly for what you bring to the table. And so I think internally, sometimes people need to become comfortable with the fact that they were earning at this level, and now, for reasons that may have nothing to do with them personally, just because the world is changing, they may need to accept work at a different level and just be okay with that.
Right. It's hard times out there. There's another question about the coronavirus, so I'll throw that in there now. I'll throw it in here now, just briefly, since we have so many more questions to get to. Concerned about coronavirus exposure. What is the best way, or where is the best way to find jobs that are good paying and work from home, like remote working positions?
Great question. If you have a set of skills that are really in demand, you're more in the driver's seat and you can call the shots more. Companies and industries vary considerably in terms of their attitudes towards working at home. I think Google, I just read in the paper yesterday, they said for the next year, people can work at home if they want. And there's, I think it was Twitter that said, from now on, anybody can work virtually forever. And then there are companies that put pressure on people, whether it's needed or not, to come into the office. So companies have very different cultures. And I think it's important to do research on the companies that you're looking at and what are their policies. And that's something to be upfront with when you're interviewing. You know, what you're willing to do and what your preferences are.
Okay, what about for global experience, for jobs, for international career shifts, you know, for jobs overseas? How would you start that process for job search?
That's a big question.
I know it is a big one.
Today, it's with the coronavirus, it's obviously a lot harder to get international jobs today. I think it's important that whatever country you're looking at, you get to know the local customs, both customs having to do with work and interviewing and what you put on your resume, as well as just customs, you know, what's this culture like? And the more you're culturally fluent and the more you can adapt yourself to different cultures, the better. And by the way, if you have international experience, whether it's junior year abroad or some program you did, whatever international stuff you have, be sure to put that on your resume.
This person is actually was an international student at the University of Rochester, so has now been working in Rochester, but is interested in, I guess, going back overseas. So, yeah, it's an interesting question. There are a lot of companies that work overseas, and government jobs also provide a lot of opportunity overseas as well. We're going to keep moving because we're about 10 minutes, maybe 10 or 12 minutes left, and we have a lot more questions. I've been in my current position for 20 plus years. I have been giving 110% to my current position. My performance reviews are always average. I have always asked how to improve and feel I have met those suggestions and improvements, but still feel my experience is overlooked. Do I go to upper management with my situation, or is it time for a change with my current organization? Yeah.
Boy, that's a big question that I would be very hard to tackle with a short answer.
Yeah.
One thought that comes to mind is before you go to upper management and start complaining, find people who know you well, who you trust, whether it's your boss, whether it's colleagues, whether it's people in another department, and try to put them at ease and assure them you want them to be as candid as possible. And just ask for honest feedback. Often people don't know how they're perceived that well. People who've had 360-degree feedback sometimes have more of an insight. But even with that, if it's an online survey, you just get the main points and you don't get the nuances. So I think it's really good to go to people who you trust and say, could you please give me feedback about how do I come across? What do people value about my contribution here, and what do people think could be different or better? What's my reputation here at this company? And as difficult as it may be, try not to get defensive and just try to really listen. People around you often know a lot more about you than they normally will be willing to tell you. But if you give them the opportunity, some people are willing to help and be honest with you. And if someone just says, oh no, everything's fine, you're doing great. Yeah, I don't know why the boss doesn't give you better reviews. You know, maybe they're just being nice to you, but then, you know, try to push them a little bit. You know, if there was one thing I could be doing differently, you know, what do you think that could be? And then maybe they still won't tell you, but then go to someone else who might be a little more honest.
I see that there are a lot of people, you know, who are 20 years or 30 years into their careers. I'm noticing that there's this common thread of people, you know, reassessing, is it time to leave my job? And, you know, that whole mid-career transition that we talk about, sort of reassessing, you know, what am I doing? Is this the right thing for me to be doing? I'm not getting the recognition I deserve. I'm just wondering, you know, we hear now that in a lifetime you could change jobs 10 times, whereas in the past, maybe you were that person who had a career and spent 25, 30 years in a particular job. So, I know we don't have a lot of time and there are still some questions here, but I feel like there is this thread through some of these questions that talk about this sort of 20-year, 30-year kind of, should I leave my job? Should I consider something else? What would you tell those people? I mean, I know we've been talking a lot about, assessing happiness and, what you need to survive, but what else could you tell them?
I would change the way I'm asking the question. Instead of, should I leave my job? Should I consider something else? Don't think about shoulds. Think about trade-offs. If I were to leave my job, what are the positive benefits and what are the potential drawbacks? I think a lot of people run their lives based on shoulds, that I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And try not to think about what you should be doing, but think about what do you want to do and what options do you have? And if I were to change jobs, what would ideally, what could it be like? I think there's benefit in getting help from others, whether it's a personal friend, whether it's a career coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a support group. I think often people make the mistake of trying to go it alone, and it can be very helpful to reach out for help, especially men. I think men tend to be socialized to be more independent and not want or need help, and it's actually a very mature thing to do, to sometimes reach out and say, even if I don't need help, it can be very helpful if I had someone else with a different perspective talking with me about this and helping me look at different options.
I'm going to go right into this question because I think it's a great question. And it says, I know that you are a very successful organizational psychologist and career coach. What is the best or most important advice that you typically give your private clients? I will add to that as well to ask you, when is it a good time to use a career coach? So if you could answer this person's question and then talk a little bit more about career coaches and what they bring to the table.
Okay. Let me start with the first part of your question. What typical advice I give to people?
Yeah.
There's advice about finding a job, and then there's advice about what you do when you get your job, which I actually think is more important. How do you manage your career? I think for people who are young, recent graduates, people often don't appreciate the importance of working on teams. At least when I went to school, it was all about individual achievement. I think it's maybe a little less true today, but it's still very true that in school you get rewarded for good grades. Do well on tests, get good grades, you rise to the next level, you get into a good school, you get into a good grad school. But in the workplace, it's different. How you manage your relationships is key. And recognizing that promotions are not based on merit. They're not based on, or they're not totally based on merit. They're not based on how well you perform your job function. That's usually part of it, but not the whole story. Ultimately, bosses are human beings. They have their likes and dislikes. And if they like being around you, they'll want to help you. If they don't like being around you, even if you have the right skills and you're doing a great job technically, you won't get promoted. I can personally think of, there was a time when I had a job and layoffs came and I survived the first layoff. The second layoff came and I got laid off, and I was flabbergasted because I was so much more skilled and had, I had a PhD, for Christ's sake, and I had all these things going for me, and they picked me to be laid off. And so I got advice from a coach at the time, and he said, go to your boss's boss, and that person's boss. Ask them to be as honest as possible and ask them why you got laid off. It wasn't fun, but I did that, and I learned some very valuable information. about how I didn't manage politics very well. I didn't understand power in organizations. And I had a sort of myopic view about doing my job rather than that part of my job, an important part of my job is managing relationships. So how you manage relationships is very, very important at whatever level you are. Looking at developing soft skills like communications, that is highly important. Being able to communicate well, unless you truly have a job where you're a web developer and you're just sitting in front of a screen, you don't have to interact with people much. And even then you should be able to communicate well. But in most jobs, how you communicate, both in writing and in talking to people, that is crucial. And so it's always good to develop those skills. It's also very important to know what your strengths are and to know what your blind spots are. If you have a job or a career where you're using your strengths, even if it's 20% of the time, but if you can use your strengths and do work that you just love, where time stands still and you're in the flow, that is priceless. So it's important to really know what you really love doing and find opportunities to do that. It's also important to know your blind spots. Often managers or leaders get 360 feedback, and it's best when it's interview-based 360 feedback, so that the interviewer can really get into the depth of what do people really think about this person. Some people have blind spots where they do things that turn others off, whether it's micromanaging, whether it's treating people disrespectfully, whether it's bragging all the time, talking too much, the opposite, not talking enough and being overly humble and modest. Whatever it may be, it's very valuable to get an accurate picture of yourself and how you come across, and then decide how do you want to deal with that. So those are some general pieces of advice I give.
That's actually really good pieces of advice, Scott. There's a lot there. So a couple of questions have come up about University of Rochester resources. So I wanted just to mention briefly, besides the Meliora Collective, and I will send out the links to these things, we do have a library of webinars for career conversations that people can access. So other career coaches that have given presentations on job search or being a mentor, any number of topics we've covered. There's actually a series about entrepreneurship. So if that's interesting to people, there's a whole series on that using our faculty from the Simon School and within the partnership with the Ain Center for Entrepreneurship. So there's some other resources that are being developed that will be coming out in the next couple of months. We'll be doing a mentorship program on the Meliora Collective, so that keep a lookout for that launch in the fall at some point. And also there's a job board on the Meliora Collective, which is a new feature that we're hoping that people will soon be posting more opportunities for fellow alumni, whether they are the hiring person or if it's just a referral. So there's lots of opportunity for us to help each other out. And the question about how can they access you, Scott. So I just wanted to mention that Scott is one of, I believe, 13 alumni career coaches now that we have on our alumni career coaches page. And you can find that on our alumni site. I will also send that link out. But you can find all of the coaches under alumni benefits. And so career resources are listed there. And so you can go there and find all the different career coaches that we have who are from around the country. Scott's actually out in California, in case anybody was wondering. So, but everybody works virtually on our list. So happily, you can basically take advantage of their expertise. They're not they're not employees of the University of Rochester, but they are alumni who are offering their services to other alumni and parents and other University of Rochester community. So Scott, we can share your information also when we do the follow-up with the video. Would that be okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Wonderful. So we're right at the 1 hour mark. So I don't like to go over because I am very aware of people's time. We did have a number of questions that we did not get to. There are a lot of, there's a lot of interest obviously with transition, but we do have also a group that we put on the collective. It's a COVID-19 kind of resource group. And hopefully Scott will be willing to join that group and we could continue this conversation. Did you want to say anything more about your coaching business or resources before we sign off for today?
No, other than that, I think when a person's trying to find a career coach, it's important to go by your gut feeling and say, is this somebody who can help me? And that a good career coach doesn't just have lots of information that they share, which you could get from a book or a website or something, but you want the career coach to be flexible and to really be attuned to you and not have some advice that they're giving, that they would give to anybody, but really try to say what is best for you in your particular situation. And is this someone who can be a thought partner and really be an ally in helping you achieve what you want?
Well, thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I definitely have learned a lot of good strategies for considering career transition. And I know that many people will probably be reaching out to you to continue this conversation. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. People who sent in questions, I tried very hard to get through all of them, but just so many. So thank you so much, Scott, for your time. And I will be sending out the video in the next couple of days. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.